Like our guy here on the panel, Chris Nilan, one of only 9 men in the history of the sport to record more than 3,000 minutes. He sounds pretty damn good to me.
And have 20 goals.
And have 20 goals.
Yes.
And win a Stanley Cup. And lead the league in penalty minutes in back-to-back years with 338 and 358 minutes, respectively.
When I stepped on the ice, I never backed down, and I never stayed down.
And I was vicious, and I was malicious, and I don't care.
He's a freaking madman. Look at him going to town. That'll be a suspension. That'll be a fine.
Welcome to the Raw Knuckles podcast, and today we have my good friend Liam McGuire. Liam, co-author of the book, The Real Ogie, The Life and Legend of Goldie Goldthorpe. What a character he is. And Liam, there's no one better when it comes to knowing the history of hockey. He's a huge Montreal Canadiens fan, and he just eats it up. You can ask him any question, and you're going to have a hard time to stump him when it comes to hockey trivia.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I was thinking of questions earlier today that I don't even know the answers to, so hopefully he's telling the truth. He could make up any answer, and I'd be like, oh, man, you're good. But I was reading about him, and it sounds like he knows everything.
Well, it's funny when I invite him, he said, Knuckles, who are you doing a podcast with? I said, Tim Stapleton. He goes, oh, he scored the last goal ever for the Atlanta Thrashers. Right away. Like
We got
bang.
a guest. We got a guest that actually knows me. They didn't have to fucking Google me.
he knew you right off the
All
hop.
right.
They didn't have to Google you.
It's my favorite
Funny
episode.
stuff.
This is my favorite episode. Hey, there he is.
Liam.
What's going on, boys?
How are you, Liam?
I was just saying, Liam, like we got our first guest that actually heard of me, so I'm excited.
Well, I was saying to Knuckles when he called me last week that I'm pretty certain, Tim, you probably, because you're from Illinois, you've been lumped in, right, with Pat and Mike. But I remember when you came in the NHL and because I follow it so closely or try to, that people were saying, no, he's not related. And then, of course, you ended up scoring the last goal in Thrasher history. So, I mean, you're in the books, man.
I still get asked if I'm related, and I like this. Let's just talk about me the whole time. I don't know. It might be a 5-minute podcast, but no, that's funny you say that, because that was early on for a long time. There was a lot of like, are you related to Pat, Whitey and the other Stapletons? And it was just,
yeah.
For a little bit, I was like, yeah. I for a little bit, I lied, just to fit in. But no.
Why not, man? Why not? I
But
mean, that's not not a bad thing.
The true question here is, Liam, do you know where he played after he left the NHL?
Oh boy, overseas, right?
Yeah,
somewhere over.
I thought anyway. I thought you went overseas and played in the KHL.
You knew, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
I cannot.
I'm impressed already.
I can't remember the name of the team.
Oh, the first team. The first team was. We're finishing this trivia question.
All right.
Knox. Hold on.
Okay.
We're gonna hear about your.
I'm with you.
We're gonna hear about your 20 goals later. Don't worry. I played in Minsk in Belarus. So.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Right,
We can
right.
carry on, Knox. You're good.
Yeah.
No, Liam, welcome to the Raw Knuckles podcast with Tim and I. And, we've been having all different types of guests. We're looking for some NHL players and coaches and media. And, we had a nice hit list going. And I had you on my hit list because I said, God, there's no one who knows more about the Montreal Canadiens, for one, but the NHL itself and your passion for that, it's incredible. And I guess I kind of want to find out, did you play the game as a youngster and have that dream of playing the NHL? And how was it that you became so interested in the Habs?
Yeah, well, figured out by Pee Wee, I just wasn't going to be good enough. That was quite apparent to me, but didn't stop my love of the game. I still, tried my best every time out there. I played right through midget into juvenile. I got cut from the junior B team, just not good enough, and played 2 years of juvenile, which is basically equivalent to junior C. And then I went into college, and I played. I didn't make the school team, but I played the level below it. But I was captain of that team. It was full contact hockey. I played there till I was 24, and it was awesome. I loved it because I'd kind of gotten a little bit more comfortable on the ice with my style, such as it was at 1,000 leagues below pro, let alone the NHL. But I never stopped having a passion for playing the game. I went into leagues after. I coached my son for 13 years. I still skate today. I mean, it's been my life as long as I can remember, just as the Montreal Canadiens have been. I mean, I was born in Montreal. I lived the first 7 years of my life in the province of Quebec. And when we moved to where I say I grew up, which is a rural road about 30 miles south of Ottawa, the closest team was still the Montreal Canadiens. So it was absolutely indoctrinated in every fiber of my being that I was going to be a Hab fan. But I wouldn't have known at that time, maybe at 6 or 8 or 10, how passionate it was going to be a part of my life. But it became that very quickly, and I've loved every second of it.
So yeah, Habs fan, and you haven't been swayed to root for those Ottawa Senators, even though they got that great American player, pain in the ass, Kachuk. But it's amazing the times I've been around you, and I know you the hockey trivia, but the facts that you come up with. Do you have a photographic memory, and how did that get going? You collect hockey cards? What? Because it's like, every stat, this guy, where he's born, when he was drafted. It's crazy.
First of all, thank you, Chris, for saying that. I don't have a photographic memory, and I don't know it all. But in respect to the trivia side of things, where I've tried, and I guess somewhat successfully, have carved out a living for 41 years, doing this professionally, where I've been paid to entertain because of my regurgitation of the knowledge on the history of the NHL. It really is just a love of doing what I do. Blessed with a very good memory. Collected the hockey cards as kids back in the day in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s. The hockey cards not only had the requisite stats on the back, but they contained a little anecdote or two. Could be Carol Vadnais with the California Golden Seals, and in 1970 led the NHL in fighting majors. He also later, previously had won a Stanley Cup with the Montreal Canadiens. He later won one with the Boston Bruins. But on the back of that card, that particular year, it might have said that he led the NHL in fighting majors. And I just filed that away. And those little anecdotes became the basis of my trivia. And then I did collect all the cards, as did all my friends. You got to keep in mind where I was growing up. I'm growing up in rural Canada in the 1960s. Every single boy that I was a friend with played hockey. Every single one. And when we weren't on the ice, we were playing in the driveway or in the park, or, in the field, on the frozen field or whatever. Like we played hockey. That's all we did. That's all we did is we played hockey and we talked hockey. And the Summit Series in '72 was a massive effect on my life as a young male, 13 years old at that time. That month of hockey, because it culminated with the start of grade 8 in elementary school, and everything the country went through, and everything that everybody was alive that had the presence of mind to understand what was happening when that series happened. It had a profound effect on me, pushing me almost to the next level of passion toward the game, albeit at that time mostly from a Canadian angle, but I was already a long time Hab fan. Like we're 3 days away from the anniversary of the first game I ever watched in its entirety, the night that Jean Beliveau scored his only overtime goal of his career, April 24th, 1969, Game 6 against the Bruins semifinals. Scored in double overtime. It ended after midnight. I had to plead with my parents to let me stay up. I was in grade 4. And I'll never forget after he scored, Fergie banging the puck in, just like, yeah, man, that one went in and this one went in too. Screw you guys. and they won the series and went on to win the Stanley Cup. And I fell asleep in class the next day, and our teacher, Mrs. McCaskill, woke me up at the back of the class, and I jumped up and yelled these scores. And she said, someone stayed up late watching the game last night, and all the kids laughed. But, I mean, that was April 24, 69, and here we are in April 21. So I remember things like that. They had a big, big, big effect on me.
What was your title like when you were like in your 20s? Or you just like, I'm like when someone's like, what are you doing with your life? You're just like, I'm the real Stats Sundin, or what, like, you know what I mean? Like, what
Stats Sundin.
You know, I think it's incredible. I think you, like, as you get older, we all know, like, you appreciate things more. I think it's amazing you're doing something straight from passion. Like, you're living a life of passion. But, you know, I mean, it's probably, I mean, did you ever think about, like what was your title? Like, what would you say you were doing in your early 20s, I guess?
I had a self-proclaimed title that I still carry with me today. I call myself the NHL, the world's #1 NHL historian is what I call myself now. Back in those days, I called myself the world's NHL trivia expert. And I took a Montreal Canadiens jersey, the first one that I ever purchased. I had to send away to get it through the Hockey News, and it got delivered through my house, came in the mail. It was probably one of the most exciting days of my life, and I wore it out pretty much. But before it absolutely disintegrated on me, I went into a little store in Manotick. I ended up in another little village that I grew up near, and they had a sports store. I ended up working there and sharpening skates there and selling hockey sticks and hockey equipment. They had a silk screening machine, and I had put on the back NHL trivia expert. So I would go to the bar. I was 18 years old. I would take my jacket off and put my back to the biggest part of the crowd. And never failed, after about 20 minutes, a couple of guys, obviously way older, I was 18, and usually much bigger, and they'd come over and say, "What's with the shirt, kid?" And I would just say, "Look, I'm the expert of the world. You want to try me on a question? Here's the deal. It's $1 a question or a pint a question." And I would sit there, drink for free all night, make $50 and go home. It was beautiful.
I'm blown away. I'm blown away. I am.
Well,
it's amazing, to be honest.
Well, when you start firing some questions at him here at some point, some trivia questions, and he blows you away even more, you'll be, I think you'd be a bit surprised. But let's say,
I told Lux, I was like, I'm going to ask him questions that I don't even know answers to, so he can probably make anything up, and I'll be like, oh, that's amazing.
So the Habs, all right? Knuckles play for the Habs. You're a huge Habs fan. Let's go, and I want to ask you a couple Mount Rushmore questions. Who's your Mount Rushmore of Montreal Canadiens, and then your Mount Rushmore of NHL?
NHL? Yeah, well, the Habs one, they're both, for me, very, very easy answers. I mean, it's Morenz, Richard, Beliveau, and Guy for the Habs, and it's chronologically, it's Gordie Howe, Bobby Orr, Wayne Gretzky, and Mario Lemieux for the NHL. I think if you polled 95% of all Montreal fans, you're going to get those four guys. And if you polled 95% of all NHL fans, you're going to get those four guys. Plus or minus somebody maybe who has a real strong feeling for somebody else that came in. And you know, Chris, do you remember when Murray Wilson was running the alumni and we did those events in Mont Tremblant? The fantasy camps.
Exactly.
And I remember counting the Stanley Cup rings in the room the second time I was there, and I believe it was 132 that were in the room that particular night. Now, mind you, Jean was there, and Pocket Rocket, and Yvan, and there's 31 just between those three. But I mean, this is the type of thing that the Habs had at that time, and I came into it in the 60s. They had it in the 50s. They had it in the 40s. They had it in the 30s with Morenz. They had it in the 20s with Morenz and Joliet. And then their first cup in 1916. That tradition that carried on for a long, long time, you know, sparked that. In terms of the NHL, I don't think there's any question. If people don't have Gordie Howe on that list, it speaks to lack of not only historical knowledge, but respect. And the way I always answered that is I take the four guys and offer up the one key thing why I think they should be. The Montreal one's a no-brainer. There isn't anybody else. Those are the four guys. The NHL one, you could say maybe is some people want to debate. Gordie Howe was in the top 5, not the top 10, the top 5 in scoring for 20 consecutive years, 1949 to 1969. Nobody has touched that. No one ever will touch that. And it's just unbelievable what he did. To me, that substantiates not only that he was a winner, 6 Hart Ross trophies, 6 Hart trophies, 4 Stanley Cups, did it all. Plus, you could make the case for a number of years in the 1950s, he probably was the heavyweight champion of the league. His fight with Lou Fontinato in February of 59 was one of the most anticipated and talked about fights in hockey history for decades. And he needs to be there. Wayne Gretzky played 20 years in the NHL, had 15 100-point seasons, 4 200-point seasons. He's the greatest statistical force in the history of sports. Bobby Orr, has a defenseman, changed the game. This guy had 6 consecutive 100-point seasons and led the league in scoring twice in 1970 and 1975 as a defenseman. He was plus 124 in 1971. His numbers, what he did offensively compared to any other defenseman in history, is exactly what Wayne did a decade later in the NHL. And I include Mario Lemieux for all of the reasons that the Mario apologists want to move him and anoint him as number 1. And look, I say to people, because I've done gigs and I get asked this all the time, and I say, look, whatever order you want. You want to come to me and get right in my face and say you think Mario Lemieux is the greatest individual talent to ever put on skates in the National Hockey League, no problem. As long as you've got Goldie, Bobby, and Wayne there, we're all good. You're buying the next round, let's go. And we're done. Because that's the 4 guys, that's the order chronologically that I call them out in. For me, I got Bobby Orr number 1, but if you want to say Wayne, Mario, or Goldie, I'm all good. But to me, those are the 4 guys in the NHL, and those are the 4 guys for the Montreal Canadiens. I'll tell you one other thing quickly, Chris. I got hired to work on the 100th, on the 100th anniversary of the Montreal Canadiens, the DVD. I got hired to work on that. I originally was hired as a consultant. I went in there and watched them at the Bell Center do an interview with Guy Lafleur, and almost threw up. It was so bad. And I went out to dinner with them that night, and they said, and they were all pumped and jacked about it and everything, said, "What do you think, Liam?" And I thought to myself, well, this is going to cost me a 5-figure gig, but I got to say it. I got to say, guys, that interview was embarrassing. You're talking about Guy Lafleur, one of the greatest players to ever wear skates. This is a Montreal Canadian DVD, and you don't even give the full due to Thursday night, May 10, 79, the greatest game he ever played. You barely went over it. I mean, I was revolted how they didn't touch on what he did in the third period of that game. I was in the building that night. And so I laid it out there and just...
Tell us what he did. What did he do? Because I remember it like it was, and I was pissed at him. I hated him for it because I was a Bruins fan still, right?
I know, buddy. You were at Northeastern, my buddy Larry Parks.
Yeah, Parksy.
You were with Parksy, and I ended up playing hockey with him later after you guys were done. And I was at that night, Game 7, Thursday night, with my late father. And if you remember, Chris, the old guy on Maisonneuve Avenue would always open. You would know this. You were playing. But as a fans, he opened the door. If you had standing room, you had a 30-second head start. Once you knew. I was at the Forum probably 40, 50 times before somebody got word to me. I took my dad around. He got the best standing room in the Reds. And we were there against the Bruins. Ken Draw was terrible that series. Absolutely terrible, by the way. Anyways, Habs are losing going in the third. Guy sets up Guy Lapointe, sets up Mark Napier, 3-all tie. Looks like we're heading to OT. Rick Middleton stuffs one from behind the net with 3 and change to go. I want to die. And then too many men on the ice. And I'll tell you right now, there wasn't just 6 on the ice, there was 7. It wasn't just Stan Jonathan went over, it was Jean Rattel as well. And when John D'Amico made the call, if he didn't make that call, none of those officials would have got out of the building alive that night. He made the call, which was the right one. Peter McNabb served it, and then the Habs didn't score in the power play right away. The Bruins got a couple clears, and then the the famous Danny Gallivan line, Lafleur coming out rather gingerly. Up to Jacques, back to Guy, boom! Stick side on Gilles Gilbert and tied that game up. I'll tell you right now, that railing, I was in the Montreal Forum 344 times. 78 of those were playoff games over 21 years. I was there for Guy Lafleur's first playoff hat trick, Saturday night, May 1st, 75, 7-0 win against Buffalo. He scored his third goal on an end-to-end rush on a delayed penalty. And I was there the final night, Monday night, March 11, 96, with that ovation for Rocket Richard. And that night that Guy scored to tie that game in 79, as God is my witness, that railing shook from the crowd in the Montreal Forum that night. And then Yvon Lambert scores in overtime, the 9:33 mark. It was almost anticlimactic, you know? And, I mean, it was like, oh, okay, thank God that's over. But, you know, and then on to the Rangers, where they lost the first game. Dryden sucked again. And then he wasn't going to start game 2, but Rajbrow broke Bunny the Rock's finger in warm-up. So they had to put Ken back in, and then the Habs said, okay, Ken, we got it from here. And they won the next 4 games, and Ken retired at 31 years of age. That's a whole other story. Anyways, I digress. That's a great memory.
Yeah.
Are you just always locked and loaded? Or do you ever go through a moment where you're like, if someone asks me a fucking question right now, I'm gonna snap? For me, I feel like, you know, I could be like, if someone's like, oh, they're like, there's a guy, you know, a buddy might be like, hey, I played in this men's league game, and he's telling me like how great this men's league game is, and I'm like, dude, I was on the ice with fucking Sidney Crosby. I don't care about the guy that worked at Chipotle, you know, like, and I'm like, does anyone ever ask you like just a dumb question where they're like, hey, name the 6 original teams, and you're just like, I don't have time for this? Are you just always ready? Like, I mean, this is amazing.
You know what? I used to say. People would come up to me, could be my wife, could be other people at different times, friends that I was out with once I started to get a little bit of a name, and it happens all the time. And I got a function tonight at 6 o'clock. I guarantee you people are going to come up. It's all the time. I've never, ever, ever, not once, taken it for granted. And I always looked at it this way, because I'm nobody, first of all, couldn't carry your guys' skates as a player. Doesn't mean I don't have a passion for the game, but I get approached too. You know, I've got a little bit of notoriety, and so people want to come up and talk. If they're going to take 30 seconds out of their day, I'm going to give them 30 seconds out of mine. And yeah, sure, you get the mundane questions. You know, you get the stuff. I get them all the time. I had some guy emailing me yesterday telling me about something that happened back in the 70s. I was going, pal, I know exactly what happened, but thank you for sending that to me. And I'm always grateful and thankful and tactful in any response. And I've never really had any. I had one bad experience, maybe 2 at the most, where somebody took issue with me speaking publicly, you know, and that hasn't happened in years. So yeah, I'm always locked and loaded, Tim, to answer your question.
That's awesome. You're a man. I don't, whether, you know, for me, I love this kind of stuff. You're a master at what you do, literally a master at your craft. And I don't care if anyone who knows you, who doesn't. I just think that's amazing. I love that kind of stuff. So it's awesome.
How about we have producer Barry? He's a huge Penguins fan. I'm sure you know a little bit about the Pens. How about who scored the first goal in history of the Penguins?
That was Andy Bathgate. Got their first goal in history. They had picked him up. Andy had a Hall of Fame career. He's known for so many things, not the least of which is winning a Hart Trophy. He won a Stanley Cup with the Toronto Maple Leafs. He actually scored the Stanley Cup winning goal for the Toronto Maple Leafs in 1964. He had come over to the Leafs from the Rangers in a massive 7-player trade that season, 63-64. Ran into massive problems with Punch Imlach, as so many of the guys did. They moved Andy on to Detroit, and then he got picked up by Pittsburgh. And that night, actually, Jean Beliveau scored his 400th career goal that same night. He got the game winner for the Habs in the Penguins' first ever game. Les Binkley was their goaltender, and they had, you know, they had, interestingly enough, within less than 2 years, they had Michel Briere, who was actually one of Guy Lafleur's best friends. And they picked him up as a draft pick. And when they won a playoff series, they beat Oakland 4 straight. In fact, Briere got the series winner. They got beat out next round, and then he had a terrible car accident. He was in a coma for almost a year and before he passed away. And they retired. He was first sweater number retired in Pittsburgh history, number 21. If you ever see that on their list, the name is Michel Briere. He was one of Guy Lafleur's best friends. And he died after almost being in a coma for a year. And that first sweater number retired in Pittsburgh history. They actually they had the second S line in NHL history, Schinkel, Shack, and Schock. Ronnie Schock and Kenny Schinkel and Eddie Schock. They had a solid team. They ended up Bob Boyowitz.
Shank, and Schock.
They had a bunch of guys that had a lot of names that I think people would know. My dear friend Noel Price from Brockville, Ontario, was also won a Stanley Cup with the Montreal Canadiens in 1966. He led all defensemen in ice time in 1968 with the Pittsburgh Penguins in the NHL. Very, very significant accomplishment in my book, because Noel played a long time of pro hockey, 21 years, and he only got about 400 games into the NHL, but he never quit. So I got lots on Pittsburgh. That's just the first few years. They went bankrupt. Ren Blair took them over. I mean, this is all before Mario and the dive and to get Mario. They had Mike Bullard. He's the only 50-goal scorer on a last-place team in NHL history. He was with the Penguins that season. So, I mean, Mario came over, and then Sid. Those two parts of the Pittsburgh Penguin dynamic are chapters unto themselves. But before you got there, you had Jean Pronovost, you had Pierre LaRouche, and then even back, as you just asked, Chris, about those first years in 67, 68, 68, 69, 69, 70, from the Bathgates and the Dwayne Rupps and the Noel Prices and the Les Binkleys into Michel Briere's and then into the Jean Pronovost and the Pierre LaRouches. They had a good history. They really did. They didn't, unfortunately, make any noise really in the playoffs until Mario and company came along. But they had a good history, and they played in the Igloo and the old Civic Center, and Pittsburgh Hornets were a long, successful standing team in the American Hockey League, man. Long, storied history. And they were the Pittsburgh Yellow Jackets before that. Now you're going back to the 1920s. So they've got a great history of hockey in that city.
What's your greatest game you've ever been to? And what's, aside from, me scoring the last goal with the Thrashers in the last, what's the one game you wish you could have, you wish you could have been at?
A game, if I could have been at game 8 in 72 in Moscow when Henderson scored, it would have. It's still a seminal moment, as I was saying to you earlier, in my life. That Thursday afternoon, September 28, 1972, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, to the 1926 mark of the third period. It changed my life. That goal definitely 100% changed my life. And if I could have been at one game, I used to go to the Forum, as I said, 344 times. I started going when I was 15 years old. And when the game was over on a Saturday night, after the Habs had won and Lafleur had scored, or my favorite player of all time, Yvon Cornway, had scored, I always had standing room. I'd be way up at the top. We couldn't afford any other tickets. And I would run my hands against the walls. And I always go out last. I'd let all the guys go ahead of me so I could stay standing as long as possible in the building. I would walk out and I would look around and say, I wonder if there's some place I could hide and I could just show up for practice tomorrow. There's just some little nook and cranny I could hide in. And I would just run my hands along the walls. And I just wished I could have been, if I could go back in time and be in that building when Rocket Richard was in his prime. I don't know what I interviewed him in 1989, and I consider it one of the highlights of my life. And anything to be at one of those games. I feel very fortunate. I was in the building when they won the Cup in 79. I got golf shirts made up that said Club de Hockey Canadien. And me and my three buddies, Tom Bissonnette, Greg Meredith, and Kevin Jardine, I said, guys, we're going to stay relatively sober for this game because Larry Robinson told me to my face the summer before that, Liam, when we win the Cup, because every year it was just, the parade will take the normal route, that when we win the Cup, you get in the room and I'll make sure you guys drink for free all night. That was a huge incentive to me. So I got the golf shirts made up. And this was May 21, 1979. As it was my last year as my last day as a teenager. I turned 20 the next day. Habs win the cup. They're carrying Gainey off the ice on their shoulders to win the Conn Smythe Trophy. I roll down. We get by every usher. We're right down out front of the dressing room, and we're in. We come in the front door. You remember it, Chris. We come in the door. There's Larry. The play is sheer bedlam. He spots me. We're about maybe 35 feet apart. So I'm like literally 3 seconds away from having my right hand on a pint.
What a thrill.
All of a sudden, we get pushed back against the wall. This rush of RCMP security come flying through and pushing everybody out of the way because they're bringing in Pierre Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada.
Oh.
He's coming in the room. We get pushed out by the mob of security. We never got back in.
Oh.
If I could have made it in the room that night, I may still be there today.
Now, here's the deal. And I know he's a friend. And I was with him last night. Okay? The Roadrunner himself. Okay? Last night we had a little alumni event, and God, you have quite the relationship with him. The year I come in, he was at training camp, 79, 80, and he retired that year for the bad back. And you talked to so many and had relationship with so many former players. If there's one NHL player today you could sit down and shoot the shit with, who would it be?
He's doing it right now.
No.
No, it's a great question.
With Tim.
Yeah. I mean, hey.
Like, I consider Chris a very dear friend, and that I talked about Tim. I talked about Mont Tremblant earlier when Murray Wilson was running those fantasy camps. That was my first time that I met you, Chris, and I don't mean to bring up a sad memory for you, but I believe your brother-in-law had just passed away at the time. Danny Mack, I think he was a police officer, I believe. And you had those
He got
hats.
killed.
He got killed, and you had those hats, and you gave me a hat in his honor, and I have that hat, and I remember being on stage that night and talking about you and how much me and millions of other Habs fans fell in love with you joining the team. And I said, to me, what really changed you physically in the NHL was that fight against Brian Curran when you started working those uppercuts, man. Nobody really had definitively done that, at least for the Habs anyway, in NHL history. I'm sorry to digress because, Tim, you made a joke, but I'm telling you, I'm thrilled, man. I'm thrilled to be talking to you and meeting you, and I'm always thrilled to be on and around Chris. Anybody today, I mean, I've never met Sidney Crosby, and I'm a huge fan. I've never met Connor McDavid, and I'm a huge fan. Those would probably be the two guys that are playing today that if I ever had a chance to sit down and talk a little bit with. I've done a few gigs in Nova Scotia. I'd love to talk to Sidney about Nova Scotia, not so much about day-to-day stuff in Pittsburgh and whatnot, but I mean, you know, he obviously scored one of the iconic goals in certainly Canadian hockey history and hockey history. Overtime to win an Olympic gold on home soil was pretty big moment, right? So, you know, and Connor, just because, I mean, he's the next one. He's the guy who's continued. He's taken up the gauntlet from Sid. And I just think it would be, I'd like to have a conversation with him as well at some point in time. But there'd be a couple others, maybe some guys who've been around a longer time that I wouldn't mind having a conversation with. But those two in particular stand out. Yvon Cornway is my, as you know, Chris. He's my number one all time, and I'm very, very close to him and his wife Evelyn and their children, and he means a lot to me. He did as a kid, and he still does. So I'm thrilled and on pleasure to be able to call him a friend. Believe me.
Well, good stuff. And if you're listening, we're in conversation with Liam McGuire, the world's number one, I don't care, number one NHL expert and historian, and it's awesome to have you here, Liam, for sure. And I'm going to pop this one at you. Which a player is the first in the NHL to score a full-strength, power play, shorthanded, penalty shot, and open net goal in the same game?
I mean, I know this.
Okay, that was easy. All right,
Well,
Tim knows it, so forget
Liam,
it.
you got competition now. I might be the. No, I think I know this. Maybe I'll just go ahead, Liam. Answer it because I know I'm surprised.
It's interesting because at the time that goal was scored, I was part owner of a sports bar in Ottawa called the Original Six. So it was more of a hockey bar than anything because Mario scored that goal on New Year's Eve, 1989. So at the time in Ottawa, there were only two sports bars that had satellite dishes. Us, and ironically, a place that I'm going to tonight called the Prescott Hotel. They were the first place in Ottawa to get a satellite dish. We were the second sports bar. We had that game on. And now we had a big party going. I wasn't paying full attention to it. But when he got the hat trick, it was when he got the penalty shot. And it was against the New Jersey Devils. And the goaltender, I think they used two that night. One of them was Chris Terreri. I think he got the penalty shot against. And it was when he got the empty netter, nobody realized at the time. Nobody at the time realized that I got asked, hey, Liam, who's the last guy to get 5 goals? I said, well, Wayne's done it like 5 times, so you got to go back. And Yvon, like Knuckles, we're just talking about Yvon Cournoyer. He had a 5-goal game February 15th, 1975. So, against the Chicago Blackhawks, final score 12-3, goalie was Mike Weiser. So they were infrequent at the time. There weren't many guys that were doing it, but we didn't know for a couple of days until, because no internet, that Mario had made this significant accomplishment, and still to this day, he's the only guy to do it.
What's your take on today's game and how it's evolved? And you got the lacrosse goals, less fighting. Like, what's you a fan of today's game?
I'm a fan of the game, but I miss the look at what Zegras and those guys are doing. I have no problem with. They need to understand, first of all, he can't go in a crease on a 5-0 game with $1:45 to go and poke at the goalie. Like, you can't do that. All the left-wing bleeding hearts out there crying about Beagle, who dropped the gloves for the first time in 9 years. His first time dropping the gloves in 9 years. And he's got a kid on his back. He turns around and fires a few shots. He got half cut by his visor. I'm talking about Terry, obviously. And all the bleeding hearts crying on social media. Like, these people never played a competitive sport in their lives. They've never been in a bar beyond 11 o'clock at night in their lives. Guaranteed. They're afraid of their own shadows. And that you've got this big business conglomerate run by 2 entities, the NHLPA and the NHL, the Board of Governors and the players. And they have what's called the collective bargaining agreement. And they have their entities that put it together. And all the left-wingers in the media that cry anytime someone throws a dirty look, or anybody that purports to be a hockey fan that think they have a problem with what Jay Beagle did, they are what's ruining the game. Because they now all have a window at the flick of a switch because of the phones and social media. And they become the cancel culture and the woke society. They can't skate from here to my stove, and yet they're going to tell you what's wrong with the game because a big bad meanie threw a punch on the ice. It's sickening to me, but, I'm not saying, hey, look, I grew up in the 70s, and the bench clearing brawls were incredible to watch. I mean, Chris was in them. I wasn't. It was a different animal. And when guys tell me, look, they were hairy situations, I totally get that and believe it. And look, we've moved so far beyond that. But let the guys be guys still. You've eliminated, all the enforcers are gone. Like Ryan Reeves, Tom Wilson, and a handful of other guys who all have to play a regular shift are all that's left from that era. So, Rick Westhead and these guys go on their soapboxes, and they go out and they keep finding the guys who had problems back in the 90s when it was the tail end of it, when the Donald Brashears and these guys were just or the 80s, the guys are and they say, all the fighting and this and that. Pat LaFontaine's career was ended from concussions, not because of fighting. Keith Primo's career was ended from concussions, not because of fighting. Jeff Courtnall's career was ended from concussions, not because of fighting. And let alone the hundreds of other guys who dropped the gloves. Like our guy here on the panel, Chris Nilan, one of only 9 men in the history of the sport to record more than 3,000 minutes. He sounds pretty damn good to me.
And have 20 goals.
And have 20 goals.
Yes.
And win a Stanley Cup. And lead the league in penalty minutes in back-to-back years with 338 and 358 minutes, respectively.
No, I like what you're saying. I think when I saw that Terry incident, I was like, if I was Terry, I would have fucking yelled at Zegras. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing?
You cannot tell me that Ryan Getzlaf, when he got back to the dressing room, I know he was hurt, so he may not even been at the rink that night, but within 48 hours, I guarantee you he went and told both those guys, hey, fellas, and this is the way it is. I love the game back then. I'm not one of these guys that pines for the yesterday. I love the memories that I have. It could have been in the building when Rocket was playing. That's just a hyperbole thing. Hey, I'd love to go back and see what that would have been like because I've known so much about his career. I love the game today. You got a month of hockey, which is the March Madness of the NHL, where you're going to have 8 a night for 2 weeks and then go down to 4. It's the best time of year. But yeah, I mean, I'm more upset at the reaction to from the pussies that comment on social media than I am about the actually watching the game. The games I love. I watch 20 games a week. I watch parts of 20 games a week. And I got the package and I watch hockey all the time and I love it. It's great sport. Can you imagine if there was no red line when Flower played or 3-on-3 when can you imagine Larry Robinson, Flower, and Cornway are going out to start the Habs 3-on-3, 1977. Hello, Gretzky, Curry, and Paul Coffey. Hello, I mean, come on. So, I wish they could have had it. But no, I love the game today. I love it. But it's reactions from the crybabies. But I love the game. We watch on TV. We see Tim make a play, see Chris make a play. We watch as fans. You guys are out there. You're not playing with Joe Buck, who's, going to work tomorrow at Walmart and wants to tell you about his hat trick in 40 and over hockey. You're in the NHL. It's a big business, man. You guys, it's your job. Like, I look back now and I want to hope that you guys got it, derived every bit of flavor out of it that you could, because I have so much respect for what anybody did that played even one game in the NHL, let alone had careers like both of you did. But it's the game. I love it.
That's awesome, Liam. I love the way that you're certainly a passion for it, but just saying what you said right there, and that's what I hated when people call players goons who fought. Like, to get to the NHL and play one game, the accomplishment of that, people don't understand that, and you certainly, your passion is awesome, and it shows in the book that you authored alongside Goldie Goldthorpe, the real Ogie, and give us a little background on him for the people that are listening, and just what this guy did in the game of hockey and how much he loved it, and your relationship with him.
Well, as you know, Chris, he absolutely loves you, and the opportunity you gave us in Montreal to come on the air, he talked about that. But here's the thing. I have never met anybody like him. And Chris, you come from a tough world. You come from a tough town. You come from a tough upbringing, and you played that way on the ice. So I think you, and I'm sure Tim, just a little bit, I'm getting to know you here, I'm sure you would have the respect. This is a guy, Goldie. He didn't make the NHL. He was in 2 camps. He had a few cups of coffee in the WHA. But he played, he played 11 years pro. It would have been several years longer, and maybe he was supposed to have potentially a tryout with the Minnesota North Stars, but he was recovering from a gunshot wound. Okay, he had been shot by drug dealers who were selling drugs to kids that he warned them about already not to do, and then his girlfriend, Goldie's ex-girlfriend, OD'd. And was on his floor when he came back from the gym with his Navy SEAL buddy that he was working out with. And Goldie said, I know exactly where she got those drugs. And him and the SEAL went over to the place. And Goldie went right through that door, kicked it in, and started swinging on every single person in there. And there were 8 of them. And he didn't go in with a gun or a bat or a knife. He went in with these. That's all he ever used. He's never done drugs. He's got the most incredible backstory of any former pro athlete, I think, in history. Because people think all the trouble he got in with the law, all the arrests, all the assault charges, they were all born out of him staying way too late, way too long to make sure anybody and everybody he was with got out of there. And when they needed a cavalry or they needed to call 911 because nothing good happened in the 70s at 1 or 2 in the morning on a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday night, pretty much anywhere in the world, which excludes everybody who's crying about someone throwing a punch in hockey today. I guarantee you they weren't there. So when Goldie did that, all the while conducting himself as an enforcer in hockey, he won a championship in the minors. He bounced from team to team. He was a hired gun. He was making $20,000 a year, playing 4 rungs below the NHL in 1975. That's crazy money.
And what team was that? What team was that, Liam?
That was on the Broome County Dusters when his contract got picked up,
right?
In Binghamton, exactly. They were the Binghamton Dusters. They were the Broome County Dusters. They had the 2 names, same location. Goldie, the owner.
Then they were the Broome Dusters.
Then they were the Broome Dusters. They said Goldie filled every single arena he was in. So when I was in Kingston in 2017, he had guested on my radio show a few months before. I went down to Kingston to meet him. We spent the weekend together with Doug Gilmore and a bunch of other guys who were former pros, some of whom you probably know, Chris, back in the day guys. And we spent the weekend together. And I shook his hand when I left Goldie that Sunday, and I said, how come no one's done a book on you? And he said, a couple guys kicked the tires, just never followed through. I said, well, will you give me a chance? And he said, sure. And it took a while to get a contract, but I finally got one. And I said, I'll get this book in print. And I did. And I'm going to get this story on the big screen, and I will. This will be a feature film movie. Mark my words. It'll be at the Sundance Film Festival or the Toronto International Film Festival in 2026 or before. And it's a story that needs to be read, and it's one that needs to be on the big screen because it's that entertaining. When we booked this thing to go on Chris's show in Montreal, Goldie said to me, we're going to Chez Perry, the strip joint, after our book signing. And I said, why? And he said, I'll tell you after. And I said, all right, Goldie, I don't care, buddy. I'll go to any bar with you. I don't care. But we're doing Knuckles' show. He says, yeah, I can't wait. Then we got the signing at Hurley's, which Mitch Melnick set up, as you know, Knuckles. And we did the signing at Hurley's. We had people drive up from Quebec City to get the book. It was a brutal night for driving, and all sorts of people came. We were drinking on the house all night. We had a hotel room right across the road. I drilled 100 back. It was so much fun. Then Goldie says at about 11:45, I thought he'd forgotten about it, but no, gotta go. And I said, Goldie, why don't you stay here, man? We got a tab. We're eating. Everybody wants to talk to us. You're signing autographs, taking pictures. I'm going. And I said, all right, Jesus, I'm going. I'm not going to let him go by himself, even at his age. Anyways, we go in there, and as you probably remember, Chris, you get wanded, right? Like they want you to make sure you don't have weapons. And there's 4 of us went. I grabbed a couple guys from the bar. I said, I don't know what's going on. This is just 3 years ago. I don't know what's going on. He's losing his mind. I don't know. Jesus, please God, don't start a brawl. Anyways, we go in there. They don't want him. I mean, these doormen are the size of a mountain. They just let him walk right in. I saw it with my own eyes. So for one, I'm freaking out on that. We go in, we sit down. He won't sit with us. He goes up. You remember, Chris, there's that place, the back side of the stage there, and there's a little raised area. And nobody was sitting there, but he went up and sat there. And so I go up to him after about half an hour. I go, Goldie, what the Christ? Like, Come and join us. We came in here. He said, I'm sitting here. I said, oh my God, like you want to pull the hair out of your head. So I stayed for about 2 hours, got a couple dances, we had a few drinks. And then I go, Goldie, I'm out of here. I'm going back to Hurley's. Are you going to stay here? I don't know what the hell's going on. And he just said, go. I said, okay. So I read about you in jail tomorrow and you've ruined this book tour. I'm going to be pissed. Anyways, he shows up back at the hotel. Long story short, we get in the car. Next morning, we have breakfast. We're driving to Kingston for another book signing. I said, will you please tell me what the hell was going on? And he said, you see where I was sitting last night? I said, yeah. He said, that's where the Hells Angels sit. Nobody's supposed to sit there. So I said, you went to sit there hoping that some Hells Angels were going to be in the bar. And he said, yeah. And I said, well, Goldie, if they were in the bar, they probably would have come up and gently asked you to leave. And he said, I was hoping for that. And I said, Goldie, like, you have to remember, guys, if you haven't read the book, Goldie was in the Hells Angels, okay, in the 1980s. Yeah. He was right hand to the lead guy who has since been killed. He was killed in prison or died in prison after he got arrested. Got the story in the book. You only leave the Hells Angels one of two ways. You go to jail or you carried out feet first, unless your name is Goldie Goldthorpe. They sent all the enforcers after him in Kelowna, BC. This is a true documented police report story. And I got it in the book. And they sent to beat his head in. And I got it in the book. That's why I wrote the story. That's why he went to the strip joint. He wanted to confront the guys in Montreal that night. And that is just a different cat, man. This isn't just a story.
Well, thank God.
He was the only Hells Angel that was also a broom duster, right?
Yeah, he would be, Tim. That's correct.
That's
all right.
Wow.
Hey, he is one of a kind, Goldie, no question about it. And the book is called The Real Ogie, and you should pick it up. Again, he is quite the character, like Liam said. And Liam, a lot of people think Gretzky came up with the number 99. He wasn't the first player to wear 99. Who was?
No. There were actually 5 guys before him. Three way back in the 30s, Leo Bergaud, Des Roche, and Joe Lamb, when nobody thought anything of it. It was at the time in the 1930s when the Depression hit, the NHL went from a 2-division 10-team league down eventually to 6 teams to what became known as the original 6. They weren't the original 6 teams. It was a media term. But as the Depression hit and the NHL suffered as the world did and teams started folding, they started to rely on what they thought could be anything that was a gimmick to get people to come to the games. So they said, let's experiment with higher sweater numbers. So they told teams to employ guys wearing higher sweater numbers. And in the mid-1930s, you had 3 guys wearing 99. Then in the 1970s, when Wilf Paymal was traded in 79 from the Colorado Rockies to the Toronto Maple Leafs, he couldn't get number 9. It was being worn by Dan Maloney, so he went with 99. And Wayne Gretzky was wearing 99 in junior and in the WHA at that time. And then Rick Dudley wore 99 for 2 weeks with the Winnipeg Jets in 1981. Now Gretzky wore 9 as a kid. He wore 11 his very first year of hockey at all in 1967. Then he wore 9 all the way through until his 3 games with Peterborough as a protect as a 15-year-old. And then he played Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds as a 15-year-old. And he started with number 14 and he went to number 12. And Angelo Bobacco and Muzz McPherson, he was all depressed about couldn't get his number because a veteran on the team named Brian Galazzi wouldn't give it up, his number 9. So they said, why don't you do what Phil Esposito is doing with the New York Rangers? He went to the Rangers in a trade on November 7, 75, 5-player deal. He couldn't get his number 7 because Roger Bear had it. So he went with 12, went with 5, and then he put on 77. And he scored a hat trick. So he went to Kenny Hodge. He said, Kenny, you got to go to 88. So he had Kenny go to 88. And he started getting everybody on the team to go to double-digit numbers. Then he went to the goaltender, John Davidson, and he said, Johnny, you got to wear 0-0. You got to wear 0-0, and you'll get a shutout right away, Johnny. You'll get a shutout right away. So this was going on. So McPherson and Bobacco said to Gretzky, do what Espo's doing. So he did, and he put on 99 with the Sioux Greyhounds in Christmas of 77.
There you go. There you go.
Is there like a stat you're proud of, like that you hope someone asks you, or like, you know what I mean? Like, is it like this is amazing?
Well, I always
like,
say now because of the phones, right? The phones have massively changed my gigs. So the two things I say when I start on a microphone in front of any crowd, I tell one person, I said, bring up the list of Stanley Cup winners going back to 1893. Just bring them up on your phone. And then I'll tell another person, I'll explain it. Everyone knows the major NHL awards, Hart Trophy, Art Ross Trophy, Conn Smythe, Vezina Trophy, and so on. I said there's only one award that you can't win a second time in a row, the Calder Trophy. Would someone please bring up all the Calder Trophy winners on their phone? So I've got one person with all the Cup winners, and I've got one person with all the Calder Trophy winners. So the Stanley Cup started in 1893, and the Calder Award, which became the Calder Trophy, which became the Calder Memorial Trophy, started in 1933. So then I say, give me any decade, and I give the winners.
That's awesome.
All right.
Awesome.
I'll give you a decade. Then the 60s Stanley Cup winners.
60 Stanley Cups, so 60 Montreal, 61 Chicago, 62 3-4 Toronto, 65 6 Montreal, 67 Toronto, 68 Montreal, 69 Montreal. Now, if you go back, just pick any one of those years, Chris.
I'll pick you 68.
Okay, well, 68 was Montreal, so they won the Stanley Cup. They beat St. Louis 4 straight. So the cup-winning goal was scored by J.C. Tremblay. John Ferguson got it in 69. And the Conn Smythe Trophy, though, was won by Glenn Hall. He became the second player to win the Conn Smythe Trophy on a losing team. The Conn Smythe Trophy started in 1965. First winner was Jean Beliveau. Second winner, losing team, Roger Crozier. Third winner, Dave Keon. Fourth winner, Glenn Hall on a losing team. And then your dear friend, the fifth winner, Serge Savard in 1969. So there's the Conn Smythe Trophy winners in the 60s. And 68 was the Habs. They won 4 straight, and they beat Boston in the round before. And that was really when I started watching. I mean, I watched the hockey games back in the 60s only came on a Saturday night at 8:30. So the 66 final against Detroit, I was only allowed to watch the last few minutes of the first period. It had already been on, and my dad said I had to go to bed. By 68, I could stay up for 2 periods. And then in 69, as I told you earlier, they let me stay up for that full game 6 in the semis, where Montreal won as well against St. Louis. But so I can do that for any decade. And
what about the Lady Bing? You know the Lady Bings every year?
I used to.
You don't have time. You don't have time for that pussy shit.
No, you know what? It's a major trophy, and I know it started in 1924, and the first winner was Frank Niber. And I know that Frank Boucher won it 7 times in 8 years. And the one year he didn't win it, in 1932, out of the 7 that he did, it was won by a guy named Joe Primo, who played on the kid line with Toronto Maple Leafs, and Charlie Conacher, and Harvey Busher Jackson. And in that year, Primo got a fighting major. Got a fighting major and won the Lady Bing. And he's not the only one to do so. Wayne Gretzky won his first Lady Bing in 1980, and he actually was in a fight that year. He fought a guy from Chicago named Doug LeCue. And anyways, I digress. But I do know most of the Lady Bing winners. I can tell you that Jacob Slavin, who won last year, became the 4th defenseman to win the Lady Bing trophy, joining Bill Quackenbush, Red Kelly, and Brian Campbell.
All right. Which NHL player, Liam, holds a rather odd record? The most regular season games played in a season. And who is he? How many games and who is he?
Is there one guy or 2? I thought it was a tie.
There's one guy.
Okay. I had Jimmy Carson and Bob Kudelski at 86 games.
I got Jimmy Carson, 86 regular season games.
Yeah. So Bob Kudelski played 86 as well.
I got a question. I don't even know the answer to. I got a question.
Yeah,
go for it.
I scored since the shootout era, I scored a shootout goal before I scored my first NHL goal.
Oh wow!
Has anyone? Yeah, I know. It's a true story. Like, there's not many goals in my career. So, but do you know if anyone's done that before me?
No, I don't. No, I don't, but I'm going to research that because, Tim, I mean,
All right.
this could really be something, man.
I got a lot of records on here, apparently. I mean, if
I'm
this
telling
one's
you,
true, then
you're growing by the hour here. We're picking another one up.
Oh God, I love this.
Much respect.
Oh, man.
Who's the first goalie to score a goal?
First goalie awarded a goal in the NHL was Billy Smith on November 28, 1979, against the Colorado Rockies. The Rocky coach was Don Cherry, and a lot of people erroneously think Hardy Astrom was a goaltender that night. It wasn't. It was Bill McKenzie. He was pulled for an extra attacker on a delayed penalty. Rob Ramage skated into the corner, fired the puck back, forgetting that that's where he was supposed to be on D, and it went the length of the ice, and they discovered that the last guy that puck had touched was Billy Smith. First guy to shoot it into the net was Ronnie Hextall. But the first goalie awarded a goal was Billy Smith. I believe there's been 13 now, I think, in total. So there's been a few, but Billy was the first. First in pro hockey was Michel Place with Kansas City in 1971, and then you got to go way back. And there were some goaltenders when they used to skate up in the ice. A guy named Patty Moran with the Quebec Bulldogs way back in the day, pre-NHL, scored a goal. So it was very infrequent.
First goalie to wear a mask. Who's the first goalie to wear a mask?
First goalie to wear a mask was Clint Benedict. Was the first to put one on. Charlie Rayner put one on briefly, both just to protect injuries. And then Jacques Plante, aforementioned Andy Bathgate, who scored the first goal in Pittsburgh Penguin history, came out years later, years after Jacques had passed away, and Andy Bathgate finally admitted publicly for the first time, Andy has since passed away too, that he deliberately shot the puck at Plante's head night in New York in 59, November 2nd. And Plante went off the ice, and he told Blake, I'm not coming back unless you let me wear the mask. And Toe had no choice, so he let Plante come back on with the mask. And then he badgered Jacques so much for the rest of the season, this was 59-60, that he eventually forced Jacques to take the mask off one more time. It was March 8th, 1960, a game against Detroit. Montreal lost 3-0. And Jacques went to Toe. He said, you can trade me, cut me, bench me, whatever. I'm never playing another game without this mask. And so Jacques relented, Toe relented, and Jacques wore a mask from that point on in his career. And then eventually Montreal did trade him to the Rangers in 62. But he was a handful, it sounds like, in his playing days. Very eccentric guy.
All right, here's one. Who was the first player to have recorded 10 consecutive 50-assist seasons?
Oh, Bernie Federkel. Bernie Federkel.
Oh, that was elementary, Nux.
Yeah.
That was
What?
elementary.
Well,
He
there's
knew
a
that.
lot.
He
Yeah.
knew that.
That's a great question. Bernie got inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2003. He's from a little town in Saskatchewan called Foam Lake, and they flew me out there. They flew me out there to MC the event. This is a town of 400 people, and there were 700 people at this dinner. And unless you've been to Western Canada, and probably I'm sure many places in the States, Illinois, other states, I'm sure, Tim, but the size of the farms are indescribable. They're 4,000 to 5,000 acre farms. It's unbelievable. Anyway, this guy, he was my guide when I got there. Picked me up at the airport in Regina. It was a 2-hour drive to Foam Lake. His name was Harold Sandberg. Older looking guy, walked with a bit of a limp. He's pretty much bald. Didn't think much of him. I said, I want to see the arena. He took me into the Foam Lake rink, and they got on the wall, all the MVPs from the Senior Hockey League in the 1960s. And I'm looking at the names, and I'm seeing Les Clark, Harold Sandberg, Les Clark. I'm going, wait a minute. First of all, Les Clark, that's Wendell's dad. And he said, yeah, that's Wendell's father. And I said, Harold Sandberg, is that you? And he said, yeah, that's me. I said, I just drove here for 2 hours. You didn't even tell me you ever played. And he said, well, I didn't want to, I figured it'd come out eventually. I didn't want to brag or nothing. I just played a little senior hockey. I got hurt, bad car accident, wasn't able to play any further. When I got back home, I phoned Wendell Clark, and he said, that guy you were with, Harold Sandberg, he was the best player by far. He almost died in that accident. He should have got killed. never really played again after that. Then I talked to Bernie Federko, but he said the same thing. Said, Liam, he's a legend. And there's hundreds of these guys. Nobody knows them. Nobody knows their stories. And they provided, Bernie Federko said, Liam, I looked up to Harold Sandberg as much as I did anybody in the NHL. And look at the career Bernie went on to. He's the first guy in NHL history with 50 or more assists, which 10 consecutive, like Chris said.
All right, I got to ask you this. Now, I love some of the crazy hockey names you hear over the years. I'm sure you have a couple. I'm just going to put one at you, and I want you to come up with another one. Sheldon Canagiza.
Yeah.
What a name. Sheldon Canagiza.
Yeah, one of the best days, man. Los Angeles King, early 1970s. I remember him as a player. And, there was another guy at the same time named Dave Harekasi. They called the wrecking ball that played in the same time period. There's been two players in NHL history who have had their names changed for the simple purpose of being able to be broadcast. One was Ennio Sizzi, and he had his name formally changed to Jim Ennio, and the other guy was Steve Wojciechowski. And he had his name changed to Steve Wachy, W-O-C-H-Y. And they're the only two in NHL history that had their names formally changed for the purpose of being able to be broadcast. They played in the 1940s. But there's some beautiful ones. I mean, how do you not love the name, especially when you know anything about him, Sprague Cleghorn? I mean, it sounds like a cartoon character, yet when Sprague Cleghorn was asked at the NHL Awards many years after he had been retired in 1950 in New York City, a reporter for Sports Illustrated went up to him and said, Sprague, how many fights do you think you were in your career? And Craig tilted his head back and put his thumb and forefinger on his chin, and he said, well, do you mean just stretcher cases? And he was dead serious. Dead serious. This guy was fined and suspended by his own coach for nearly killing guys on the ice. I'm not saying killing facetiously. I mean, He was, when I interviewed King Clancy in 1983 in Maple Leaf Gardens, that was the first name that I shot at him. I was a snot-nosed kid going to college in Toronto, sitting in front of him. I was 23, 22, looked like I was 12, and that was the first name I ran by him. And his eyes got as big as saucers.
He wanted to rip your head off.
How do you know that name? And I said, well, I know quite a bit of history, sir. I know quite a bit of history. He was psychotic. I mean, Sprague Cleghorn. How do you not love the name?
How about what team holds the record for most 20 goal scorers in one season? Who were those 20 goal scorers?
Boston Bruins 77-78 with 11 broke the record. Actually, the Habs had with 10 in 1971, and actually St. Louis a couple years later in 81 ended up with 10 guys as well. But that Bruin team, the last guy, the 11th guy to do it, he played here in Ottawa for the 67s.
He was an American
kid named Bob Miller. He was the 11th guy to do it. There was a massive feud that night between the benches, between the Bruins head coach, Don Cherry, and the Leafs head coach, Roger Nielsen. And Grapes was calling Rogers a lot of very uncomplimentary things. and he'll never forget it. Grapes talked about this many times. There's a face-off. The Leafs are down by a goal, face-off in Toronto's end, and Nielsen pulls Palmateer. They got an empty net. So Grapes throws Miller on the ice right away, just praying to God that Rattel's going to win the draw, which he did. Beats Miller because Grapes knew what was going on. And he feeds Miller, and Miller became the 11th 20 goal scorer. John Wensink had 16 goals that year. He was 4 goals away, or they would have had 12. But, I mean, like Stan Jonathan scored 20 that year. You had your McNabbs and Rattels and O'Reillys and Parks, Middletons, but Bob Miller and Stan Jonathan and Greg Shepard, some of these other guys, you wouldn't probably remember, but it's an incredible accomplishment by a hell of a team that if they don't run into Habs in the late 70s, they win a couple cups all day. But the Habs in the late 70s are the greatest team in the history of the NHL.
Whoa. God, I could just Liam. You can't stump you. God, let's think. Who? Let me think.
Ray Ferraro's favorite pregame meal.
I don't know.
Chicken palm, baby.
Razor's a great guy. 408 goals. His numbers in juniors are insane, and I think he's as good or better than any color analyst in the game today. I'm a big fan, and I know him a little bit. I consider him a friend. We've never actually sat down and had any pints together or anything, but I think he's a good. Played his heart out, and former Atlanta Thrasher, and I mean, just a great guy, great guy. I mean, he was on those Hartford teams. I know how much he loved coming in the Forum. They just couldn't get a win when it mattered to save their lives. I was at the game when Lemieux scored in '86 in overtime, 5:55 mark on Mike Lemieux. I mean, it was unbelievable, and they just couldn't. He rushed Courtnall, big OT against him as well in '89. I mean, it was just. They just always ran into the Habs of the Bruins. It's kind of like the Winnipeg Jets being in the division with Edmonton and Calgary. Just so tough. Dale Howardchuk, so many great years, just couldn't get over the hump and get a cup, All
right, Liam, if you could go to dinner with 4 NHL players all time, who would they be? I'm sure probably, I guess it would, no, not necessarily be your Rushmore, but who would those 4 players be?
Even dead or alive?
Dead or alive. Any 4 players.
Well, Rocket Richard, Eddie Shore, 100% Eddie Shore, probably Jean Beliveau, and I'll show my partiality towards Montreal, I guess. I think my only non-Hab would be Eddie Shore, but I think I'd go Rocket, Beliveau, and Flower. I mean, I guess you'd say, why not Yvon? I mean, I have
because you've already had dinner with him. Right?
What about from 1990 to the present?
90 to present, I would probably say Wayne. I'd probably but I've been out with him too, though. So I guess you'd have to if you clarify and say,
get rid of Wayne.
So I'd probably Mario. I only met Mario formally one time. I scrummed him in interviews a few times at the rinks here in Ottawa, but I never obviously was able to have a beer with him. He would be on the list for sure. Post 1990, I would say that I have not been with. Boy, that's a good question. Probably put Sid in that list, and I would thinking quickly here. Boy, so many. I've been lucky, I mean, I've sat down with a lot of guys. Like I was very fortunate to sit, work several gigs with Bob Probert, who I just loved. I mean, I just absolutely loved the man. And I mean, I would, I guess Wayne, or I should say Mario, Sid, like 2 others, right off the top of my head, post 1990. I've sat down with Stevie Y, so I have to give that some thought, man. I mean, Patrick Waugh, maybe, I think that'd be kind of a fun night.
All right, we're going to leave you on this one, Liam. What if NHL is to have another franchise? What city would you say to put it in?
It's actually online today talking about this and hoping and praying that when they go to 34 that Quebec gets a team. I mean, they've had the building built for a few years, and I know there's other teams in the States that are sniffing around, your Portland's and maybe your return to Kansas City and what have you. But how you expand any further and not give Quebec a shot? Again, I don't know if they've got all the financial infrastructure in place. I believe they did at one point, and hopefully maybe they do again. But I don't know how you beat that rivalry, Chris. You were front and center in it.
Yeah.
I don't think there was a better one. Crazy. It wasn't just the teams. It was the ownership. It was the cities. It was the beers. It was politics. You had Molson's versus O'Keefe. You had Michel Bergeron versus the world. You had the brawls on the ice. You had the brawls in the stands. The media hated each other. I mean, I don't think for 16 years and 5 playoff series, how you don't bring a team back to Quebec when you know the passion that province has for hockey, and given what they had before. I think to me would be the one city that I really, really, really hope and pray they. I could not agree more. And I
honestly, I don't think I've ever met anybody with as much passion for the game
I was just gonna say that.
than you have. And it's just awesome to hear how much you love the game and how much you're into it. You're a good friend. A lot of respect for you. And we will have you back for sure. And the next time with the real Ogie, Goldie Goldthorpe. Thanks for joining us today, Liam. Appreciate it, buddy.
Thanks,
Boys,
Liam.
thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Barry, thank you. Chris, Tim, everybody, thank you very much.